Our first story takes us to a desolate stretch of highway outside of Los Angeles, known for its chilling legends and eerie atmosphere. Late one Halloween night, Jake Weber, a well-known paranormal investigator, was driving home after filming a new episode for his horror podcast. The road was empty, and the only sound was the haunting music of Linkin Park playing on his car radio. As he drove, Jake saw a figure standing by the roadside, thumb outstretched, hitchhiking. The figure looked like a young woman, her clothes tattered and her face pale. Against his better judgment, Jake decided to stop and offer her a ride, thinking it would make for an interesting story. The woman got into the car without a word, her presence sending chills down Jake's spine. She sat silently, staring straight ahead. When Jake tried to make conversation, she only responded with eerie monosyllabic answers. As they drove, Jake noticed that the temperature in the car dropped significantly, and the woman's reflection was not visible in the rearview mirror. Suddenly, the radio started to play a distorted version of Smooth Criminal, and the woman began to hum along, her voice low and haunting. Jake's unease grew, and he decided to take a detour to a more populated area. However, the woman grabbed his arm with a cold iron grip, forcing him to stay on the deserted road. In a desperate attempt to escape, Jake stopped the car and told her to get out. The woman turned to him, her eyes hollow and filled with an otherworldly light. She whispered, "You shouldn't have stopped," before disappearing into thin air. Shaken, Jake continued his drive, but the nightmare was far from over. He saw the same hitchhiker standing by the roadside again and again, each time looking more sinister. Desperate and terrified, Jake floored the accelerator, trying to outrun the ghostly figure. When he finally reached a gas station, Jake stumbled inside, breathless and pale. The attendant looked at him with concern and said, "You must have seen her. They say she was a victim of a brutal crime, and her spirit haunts this road, seeking revenge on anyone who dares to stop." Our second story takes place at a remote rest stop in the Nevada desert, a place known for its eerie atmosphere and unsettling occurrences. Mark and Lisa, a young couple on a road trip, decided to stop at the rest stop to stretch their legs and use the facilities. The rest stop was deserted, with only the faint hum of a vending machine breaking the silence. As they walked around, they noticed an old, weathered sign warning travellers about strange sightings in the area. They laughed it off as a local legend and went about their business. As night fell, the rest stop took on a more sinister tone. The wind howled through the empty buildings, and the temperature dropped. Mark and Lisa decided to leave, but their car wouldn't start. The engine sputtered and died, leaving them stranded in the middle of nowhere. Desperate, they tried to call for help, but their phones had no signal. The darkness closed in around them, and they felt an overwhelming sense of dread. They heard footsteps approaching, but no one was there. The air grew thick with an oppressive presence, and they saw shadowy figures moving in the corners of their vision. In a panic, they decided to take shelter in one of the old buildings. The inside was filled with dust and cobwebs, and the walls were covered in strange symbols. As they explored, they found an old journal detailing the experiences of previous travellers who had encountered the same eerie phenomena. The journal spoke of ghostly apparitions, strange sounds, and an overwhelming sense of fear. The last entry was a frantic plea for help, describing the feeling of being watched and hunted. As they read, they heard a low, guttural growl coming from the darkness. Terrified, they huddled together, trying to make sense of what was happening. The growling grew louder, and they saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at them from the shadows. The creature, a demonic entity with sharp claws and fangs, emerged from the darkness, its eyes filled with malevolence. Mark and Lisa ran for their lives, but the creature was relentless. It chased them through the rest stop, its growls echoing through the night. They found themselves cornered with no way to escape. The creature lunged at them, and they screamed in terror. The next morning, a passing motorist found their car abandoned at the rest stop. There was no sign of Mark and Lisa, only their belongings scattered around the area. The story of their encounter with the demonic entity became a chilling legend, a warning to others about the dangers of the remote rest stop. Our third story takes place on a lonely stretch of road in the Midwest, known for its ghostly sightings and eerie atmosphere. Late one night, Alex, a long-haul truck driver, was driving his rig through the desolate landscape. The only light came from his headlights, casting long shadows on the pavement. As he drove, he noticed a truck approaching in the distance. The truck's headlights were blinding, and Alex could barely see the road ahead. As the truck passed, he caught a glimpse of the driver, a gaunt, ghostly figure with hollow eyes and a malevolent grin. The truck sped past, disappearing into the night. Alex shook off the encounter, thinking it was just his imagination. However, the truck appeared again, this time right behind him, its headlights glaring in his mirrors. The truck's horn blared, a deafening sound that seemed to shake the very ground. Panic set in as the ghostly truck driver rammed Alex's rig, sending him skidding off the road. Alex managed to regain control and continued driving, but the truck followed relentlessly. The ghostly driver seemed to be playing a deadly game, forcing Alex to swerve and dodge in a desperate attempt to escape. As the night wore on, Alex's fear grew. He remembered stories of a phantom truck driver who haunted these roads, a vengeful spirit seeking revenge for a fatal accident that had claimed his life. The thought sent chills down his spine, but he had no choice but to keep driving. The ghostly truck driver continued to torment Alex, appearing and disappearing at will. The truck's headlights would suddenly vanish, only to reappear in his mirrors moments later. The driver would pull alongside Alex, his hollow eyes staring into Alex's soul before vanishing into thin air. Exhausted and terrified, Alex decided to pull over at a truck stop, hoping to find safety in numbers. As he parked, the ghostly truck driver appeared one last time, his malevolent grin sending a shiver down Alex's spine. The truck vanished, leaving Alex in a state of shock. The truck stop was eerily quiet, with only a few other trucks parked in the lot. Alex spoke to the other drivers, sharing his harrowing experience. They listened with solemn faces, knowing the legend of the phantom truck driver well. They told Alex that the ghostly driver was said to haunt the roads, seeking revenge on those who dared to drive at night. The story of Alex's encounter became a chilling tale among the truckers, a warning to others about the dangers of the haunted highway. Our fourth story takes us to the outskirts of a small town in Ohio, where an abandoned car sits by the roadside, shrouded in mystery and fear. The locals speak of a curse that haunts the car, a curse that claims the lives of those who dare to drive it. One night, a group of teenagers decided to test the legend, eager for a thrill. They found the car, a rusted old sedan, sitting in the weeds by the road. The air around it was cold and heavy, and the car's interior was covered in dust and cobwebs. Ignoring the warnings, they decided to take the car for a drive. As they started the engine, the air grew colder and the radio crackled to life, playing an old, haunting tune. The car's headlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the road. The drive began uneventfully, but soon strange things started to happen. The car's speedometer fluctuated wildly, and the steering wheel seemed to have a mind of its own. The teenagers felt an oppressive presence in the car, as if they were being watched. The radio continued to play the haunting tune, and they heard whispers coming from the back seat. When they turned to look, they saw the ghostly figure of a man, his eyes filled with anger and sorrow. He reached out to them, his fingers cold and skeletal. Panicking, they tried to stop the car, but the brakes failed. The car accelerated, the engine roaring like a demon. The road ahead twisted and turned, the car swerving dangerously. The ghostly figure's grip tightened, and they heard a voice whisper, "You shouldn't have come." Desperate and terrified, they managed to crash the car into a ditch. The impact was brutal, and the car's occupants were thrown about violently. When they came to, the ghostly figure was gone and the car was silent. The teenagers staggered out of the wreck, shaken and bruised. They left the cursed car behind, vowing never to speak of the night again. The car remains by the roadside, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurk in the most ordinary places. Our final story takes place on a remote country road in the deep south, a place known for its eerie disappearances and unsettling atmosphere. Late one night, Emma, a young woman driving home from a family reunion, found herself on this desolate road. The only light came from her headlights, casting long shadows on the pavement. As she drove, she noticed the road ahead seemed to shift and change, as if it were alive. The trees lining the road appeared to move closer, their branches reaching out like skeletal arms. The air grew thick with fog, and the road behind her vanished into the mist. Emma tried to turn back, but the road had disappeared. Panic set in as she realized she was trapped. The fog grew thicker, and she felt an oppressive presence watching her. She heard whispers and saw shadowy figures moving in the corners of her vision. Desperate, she continued driving, hoping to find a way out. The road twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the darkness. She saw strange symbols carved into the trees, and the whispers grew louder. The air was filled with a sense of dread, and she felt as if she were being hunted. Suddenly the fog lifted, and Emma found herself at a crossroads. She saw a figure standing in the middle of the road, a tall man with hollow eyes and a sinister grin. He raised his hand and pointed to the left, his voice echoing in her mind, "This way." Terrified, Emma turned the car and followed the road. The man vanished and the fog closed in around her. She drove for what felt like hours, the whispers growing louder and the shadows closing in. The road seemed to stretch on forever, leading her in circles. Exhausted and scared, she finally saw a light in the distance. She sped towards it, hoping to find safety. As she approached, she realized it was a small, run-down gas station. She pulled in and stumbled inside, breathless and pale. The attendant looked at her with concern and said, "You must have taken the disappearing road. They say it leads you to your darkest fears and never lets you go." Emma's heart sank as she realized she was trapped in a nightmare with no escape.